Bees were living in this water meter box, and when the meter reader came to check the meter, he found a bunch of bees flying around, so the water company called me to come and remove them. So I lit my smoker and I got to work. There was a lot of bee traffic at the entrance of the hive, so I was hopeful that there was a healthy colony and a healthy queen inside. You can see the guard bees here doing their job at the entrance of the hive. I started by using my hive tool to pry the lid open. These bees were not showing signs of aggressive behavior at all, so I felt very comfortable continuing my work without protective equipment. I slowly lifted the lid to see what was inside, and as careful as I was, the lid slipped and a bunch of bees flew off it and all around me. But again, they were not aggressive towards me at all, so I just kept working. I set the lid down as close to the hive as possible since I wanted all the bees to still be together at this point. This was a decent sized colony, and I could see brood comb almost immediately, so I was hopeful that there was a strong queen here. I gave the bees a bit more smoke to clear the area before I got to work, and because there were so many bees flying around me, I gave myself some smoke too. Like other animals, bees move away from the smoke. But these bees were telling me that they didn't mind my presence here at all, so I started to remove the hive. The first piece of comb I pulled up was full of food, so I put it straight into the feeder of the new hive. The second piece of comb that I pulled up was full of worker brood, pollen, and nectar, and I wanted to make sure the bees would have everything that I removed from the water meter box available for them to use in their new home. So I took a second to look for the queen, but I didn't see her, so I put this piece of comb into a wooden frame of the new hive using rubber bands. And while there were still a bunch of bees flying all around me, I could tell that these bees were not acting defensive towards me at all. One of the most important parts of my job as a beekeeper is learning how to understand bee behavior. Beekeepers have to learn how bees live and work and communicate so that we can think like a bee and understand the needs of every colony. And these bees were telling me that they didn't mind my presence in their hive, and I'm always hopeful that my actions communicate back to the bees how much I respect them. I was getting close to having all of the comb out of the water meter box, but there were still a couple of large pieces left. This one was again full of brood, which are baby bees, so that was another good sign that there was a healthy queen here. And of course, finding the queen takes a lot of patience and practice, but it's a critical part of the removal process. However, I didn't see the queen on this piece, so I slid this piece of comb into the wooden frames of the temporary travel hive. You can see that this piece of comb fit almost perfectly into the frame, and there's actually less coincidence to that than you may think. When bees look for a new place to live, the place they choose is not random. They have specific preferences for things they like the size of the container they move to. And so, unfortunately, for all the meter readers out there, these water meter boxes are designed in a way that really replicates the preference of the bees, just like the standard beekeeping equipment that you see beekeepers use every day. And this is what the inside of the water meter box looked like after I had removed most of the comb. So then it was time to start scooping bees out of the water meter box and into the new hive. With each handful of bees I scooped, I was searching for the queen. But with all of the bees still in the box, I had a lot of scooping ahead of me, so I just kept at it while looking for the queen. If by chance I missed the queen and I scooped her and I put her into the box without seeing her, the bees would let me know. They would all start rushing to get into the box, and I'd know that the queen was in there. But since that wasn't happening, I just kept scooping handful after handful of bees. And people often ask me why I don't wear gloves or scoop the bees up with something other than my hands. And really, it's just my preference for how I like to handle bees and do my bee work. I always try to treat the bees like I would want to be treated if someone were moving my home and my entire family to a new location. Working alongside the bees as closely as possible just feels like the right way for me to do that. And you can see how when the bees are clumped together like this, it actually makes it pretty easy to just scoop them up with my hands. and they have pretty hard exoskeletons, so after they grab my hand when I'm scooping them, it doesn't hurt or harm them when I give them a good shake into the new hive. By this point, some of the bees were starting to go into the new hive on their own, and I wanted to make it easier for them to get in there, so I made a little bee bridge by breaking a piece of comb off the water meter box lid. Bees are used to crawling on comb all day, but they're not so used to crawling on the ground. And you can see here how some of the bees were starting to use the bee bridge already, but they just weren't moving in very quickly yet. And that's because I still didn't have the queen. So I got my smoker and I moved some of the bees out of the way so that I could look for the queen. You can see that there are still a ton of bees flying around me, but the queen is actually a terrible flyer, so I wasn't too worried about her flying away. And the bees know how important she is, and so they want to care for her and protect her. But the bees and I are on the same team here, and I also know how important the queen is to the colony, and I also want to care for her and protect her just like the bees do. So I stopped smoking the bees for a moment, and I took some time to just look for the queen. And after a few minutes, I saw her running along the side of the water meter box. She was only visible for a short time before she tried to go into hiding again. So I put her in a clip to keep her safe, and I put her in the new hive. And really, only a few moments after that, the bees started running out of the water meter box, over the bee bridge, and into their new hive to be with their queen and the rest of the colony. So I just waited and watched as all the bees moved in. It's really amazing when they do this, and it makes me feel like this was a successful removal for me and the bees. You can see more and more bees covering the box as I waited, and as I waited, I used the time to clean the comb off the top of the lid. This was pretty much just empty comb, so it went right into a bucket that would be offered to the bees once I got home. After I cleaned the comb off the lid, I decided to close the lid on the hive, but it was still open at the bottom for more bees to move in. Although it really seemed like these bees were more comfortable on the outside of the box, which was perfectly fine by me so long as the colony as a whole was in or on the new hive with their queen. You can see that most of the bees and the comb were out of the water meter box at this point, but I still wanted to wait as long as possible to leave, so I just waited and watched, and you can see that the bee bridge was even starting to clear at this point. When it seemed like all the bees that wanted to had gotten in or on the new hive, I picked it up and I carried it to my truck. I put the bees in there and we drove home, and it was another great day of saving the bees.